Hello friends, welcome to Research Life. I am your host, Dr. Sabyasachi Sengupta, founder and director of Sengupta's Research Academy and practicing vitreoretinal surgeon in Mumbai. Research Live is a platform meant to ignite the spirit of clinical research amongst all of us. Here I host some of the most eminent researchers in India, and I'm confident that their journey will inspire us all.
It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our guest today, Professor Amod Gupta, to Research Live. Professor Gupta is an emeritus professor at the Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, Chandigarh, India. He was the Dean and Medical Faculty at PGI Chandigarh between 2011 and 2014 and has served as the head of the Department of Ophthalmology at PGI Chandigarh between 1989 and 2015. He raised one of the most advanced eye care centers in India, the Advanced Eye Center at PGI Chandigarh in the year 2006. He was the founder president of the Uveitis Society of India and has been the past president of the Vitreoretina Society of India. He has had a trailblazing career and has received more than 40 awards till date. Some of the most prestigious are the Padmashree, which is the fourth highest national award for civilian Indians in 2014 by the President of India. He was a recipient of the first B. Patnaik Memorial Oration of the Vitreoretina Society of India in 2011. He received the award of the Teacher of Teachers by the L.V. Prasad Eye Institute in Hyderabad in 2012. He delivered the Dr. G. Venkataswamy Endowment Lecture for the Uveitis Society of India in 2017. He has been at the forefront of clinical research in the fields of retinal and uveal diseases and has published 380 original research papers in peer-reviewed journals. Professor Amod Gupta is best known for his work on ocular tuberculosis, which has led to many seminal papers in this niche field. He described a new entity called tubercular serpiginous-like choroiditis that is recognized all over the world and was published in the journal Ophthalmology in the year 2003. Some of his other highly respected and cited work include he was among the first to characterize fungal endophthalmitis after cataract surgery and described its clinical presentation, microbiological spectrum, and outcomes. He provided initial evidence for recommending statins in the treatment of diabetic macular edema in the year 2004. I am sure all of us are in awe of Professor Amod Gupta for all that he has achieved and are eager to listen to his research and publications journey. So let's hear it from him. Welcome, Professor Gupta, to our show.
To Dr. Sabyasachi for asking me to share my experiences in my research journey and also providing me this opportunity to share my thoughts on your absolute fantastic platform. Thank you very much.
The first question was, how did your clinical research and publication journey start? What motivated you?
There's a little background to this. When I joined my residency in 1974, we used to have a system which was 1 plus 3 years, and they had to compulsorily do a thesis. When I joined, the thesis was abolished and the residency system became 1 plus 2 years. So one of these days, my chief called me and handed over 2 bound copies of thesis and asked me to write a paper. And these subjects concerned the biochemistry of lens and cataract and dealt with subjects like reduced glutathione, soluble proteins, insoluble proteins, lipid peroxidase, and LDH and G6PD, things I had never heard of. So I had to learn the lens biochemistry from scratch to be able to write papers in longhand, which eventually got published in 1975 and 1976, with due credit given to the residents who had done the actual work. And for me, it was essentially a learning exercise which I cherished all my life.
The next thing we wanted to know is, did you have a mentor or someone whom you looked up to?
Jan was my mentor in true sense. In his days, he was forced to reckon with in academic ophthalmology, having done pioneering work in diabetic retinopathy and myopia and intraocular pressure and diabetic retinopathy. He was the first one in the world to suggest that corticosteroids had adverse effect on CSR. I have never seen a more astute clinician and a very sharp observer of clinical science He didn't have access to a fundus camera and slit lamps like what we used to have now, but he used a direct ophthalmoscope and his meticulous notes taking. Some of these things which have he left with me as his legacy, which helped me write so many papers.
The next question was, how and when did you publish your first paper?
I published my first paper in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology in 1979. It concerned a patient of Wolfram syndrome, a rare disease. The patient was admitted under my watch and unfortunately expired. And till that time, it was not known what was the pathology of Wolfram syndrome. And I ran around to get a faculty from the pathology department to do a full autopsy. Unfortunately, we did not find anything significant in his brain or in hypothalamus or other organs. This, to my mind, remains the first published report of autopsy in a Wolfram syndrome. The next, I was assigned by my chief to supervise a junior resident who was doing a prospective study of congenital abnormalities of the newborn and also simultaneously looking at the ocular hazards of birth. This study we published in British Journal of Ophthalmology in 1980, and one of the most frequently cited study on the subject of ocular hazards of birth. On 16th February 1980, there was a major solar eclipse in India. There was a lot of excitement about this eclipse, and we set up a clinic to look for the patients who had solar retinopathy. We did the fluorescent angiography and did the clinical pictures and the fundus pictures. And we published this paper in British Journal of Ophthalmology in 1981. We revisited the subject when we first report of OCT changes in solar retinopathy was published by us in 2004 to show that in solar retinopathy there is damage to the RPE layer and the outer retina.
The next question was, how important is it to start your research journey early, maybe even during MBBS or residency? Do you think it's okay to start late?
Well, it's okay to start your research at any age in your life, but much better to start early. We need to catch young minds, when they are still plastic, the impressionable age. We need to ignite those minds to be able to do research. And for that, I think they need to be exposed to research laboratories of all kinds and varieties in their high school, maybe during their summer breaks, and they can just be hanging around the labs, asking questions, maybe very foolish questions they can ask the researchers, so that they have some curiosity. And if we could, generate that kind of curiosity among the young people, it'll be a great job done. Certainly, they should be exposed to laboratories in their MBBS studies. As I'm sure, a simple example like DNA extraction. 99.9% of the MBBS doctors won't know how to extract DNA. Well, it's one of the foremost technologies now using polymerase chain reaction to be able to make the diagnostics. When they are doing a thesis during post-graduation, it's more of an obligation than any research interest on the part of the student. And by that time, they are really not interested in research, but they're concerned, their mind is occupied all the time about their career, about their job, and future practice.
The next question was, how important is it to publish your thesis?
It's a reflection of how serious you are in pursuing an academic career. If you did not even publish your thesis, how are you likely to fulfill an obligation as a teacher when you're expected to guide thesis and guide research as a teacher?
The next question was, do you think it is important to have formal training in clinical research methodology before starting your journey, or is it okay to learn on the job?
Well, speaking for myself, I learned research on the job. But if I have to rewind my career and start afresh, I would certainly like to have a formal training in clinical research methodology. We used to have biostatistics as a compulsory subject which we need to clear before we could sit for the exam. It was a small department, very few faculty members, and they had to look after the training of almost 1,000 residents in the institute. They taught us very simple statistics like student t-test or a chi-square test. We were never taught how to calculate, for example, the sample size. What we need now in our country is having a clinical study design units consisting of epidemiologists and biostatisticians besides the clinicians to carry out meaningful and impactful research.
So the next question was, how important is it to have an international stint or a fellowship to enhance your research career? Did you have one, and what impact did it have on your career?
Well, if you can get an international fellowship or opportunity to do a research fellowship, I think nothing like that. I mean, it will be a great thing to learn, at the hands of very keen researchers. The only thing you need to do is perhaps locate right faculty where you wish to do that kind of a training. For myself, well, I did go for a short stint as a fellow, which was more like a clinical observer rather than a researcher. So it didn't really help me in pursuing my research work ever in my life.
So the next question was, how should we approach the concept of biostatistics? It is a relatively feared subject. How did you approach biostatistics, and how did you communicate with your biostatistician?
Well, biostatistics has been my Achilles heel, and probably true for most of the researchers in India. We really don't have a great training in biostatistics. We do not have very strong biostatisticians who would understand the research protocols. So it has been a challenge all my life how to deal with the biostatisticians and how to frame our research questions and what statistical methods to use. And every time the paper comes back with queries on biostatistics, I think we have to chase around and try to figure out statisticians who would be able to solve our problem. I think the one solution probably lies in strengthening this particular aspect of epidemiological studies, to have more faculty trained who help us in framing the right research questions, who help us in designing studies as a part of, as I said earlier, as a part of the clinical study design unit.
So the next question was, how did you get so many research ideas throughout your career? I think it's vitally important to have novel ideas to pursue. So how did you really manage to get so many ideas?
I think anybody keen on doing research needs to study the current literature, look at it very critically. What are the questions raised in that paper? You need to develop a sharp eye for looking at what are the questions remained unanswered, or what the authors raised those questions for any future further studies. So we need to be looking out for that. Unless you read and you need to read very extensively, and you have to go beyond, say, like ophthalmology. You need to look at the journals, like JAMA or New England Journal of Medicine, or maybe other research journals like the Nature, the Science, to get some ideas from across the fields. By limiting yourself to the area of your own interest, perhaps you'll not be able to generate any worthwhile research ideas.
Sir, so the next question was, how did you prepare your manuscripts? We've seen that they have all been very immaculate. Is there a particular order in which you prepare your manuscripts?
The easiest part of the manuscript preparation is the results. And also, I think the most important, which people are going to look for in your paper. What you found is only you know about it. You can put it in any tabulated form or in form of any charts or master charts and do all the statistical analysis, and then you know for yourself whether this what you have found, is it significant, is it going to make any difference or not. The next part is the preparation of the methods. Again, you know exactly how did you carry out the study. What was the methodology used? Was it a prospective study? Was it a retrospective study? My only submission here is please do not fabricate your data. Do not say anything which you have not done. If you have not done a prospective study and you claim that it was a prospective study, the reviewers are going to catch up very quickly because they are experienced to discover some of these inaccuracies and discrepancies in the manuscript when it is submitted, and it will never be accepted. The most important part of the manuscript is the title, because it's the title which attracts a reader to a particular paper. So you keep it towards the end of your manuscript preparation. And the next important is the abstract. The reviewers, and I review a lot of papers, for a number of journals, and I think very often I'll pay attention to the abstract. Every word that is put in the abstract has to have a meaning, has to have some kind of conclusions. And if the reviewer is happy with your abstract, and majority must realize there are very few people who read the whole manuscript. People have free access to abstracts. That is what your readership is going to read. And those, if your abstract is going to get attention from a keen researcher who wishes to pursue research in the same area, he will go all out to get a full manuscript. The third is the introduction. I think introduction is the next important part which I would write, and here after the results, because that is where you want to attract the reader. In the first few lines you have to say why you undertook the study and what it means. I think the least important component is the discussion. I don't have the patience to know how the authors are trying to hypothesize what they found. What they found is what I'm interested in. What they mean, what they conclude is I'm interested in. And of course, the reviewers always look at the bibliography, the references. If you are putting down inaccurate references, it shows that you are not a meticulous worker. You lose your credibility as a researcher if you don't put even the references in the proper manner.
The next question was, is there a group of papers which have been your most favorite, or rather have been your most impactful?
Papers which I believe we were first in the world to say something very significant, and they made huge impact on the way the people perceive those kind of diseases. And the most important of these, I would believe, is a bunch of papers, I think more than 25 now, on TB uveitis. And in 2003, we were the first one in the world to say that serpiginous choroiditis could be related to tuberculosis. And we went on to characterize this, and we also went on to characterize other phenotypes of TB uveitis using a variety of technologies like PCR and PET scan and CTs, and characterizing on OCTs, on autofluorescence. Using a variety of techniques, we try to characterize these diseases, and now this uveitis is recognized not only in the endemic countries like India, but all over the world. The other most impactful paper has been when we first said that, we could use atorvastatin as an adjunct in management of patients who were dyslipidemic and had diabetic macular edema. And this was a very, very small study which emerged out of a MS thesis. And it has been cited so frequently now. The other impactful research has been identifying fungus as a main culprit in post-operative endophthalmitis in our own setting in India, as well as finding out that fungal contamination of the usual infusion fluids like dextrose 5% could, even in healthy people who are just getting it for very, very minor ailments, could result in fungal endophthalmitis.
The next question was, is there anything in particular that you're working on right now that you want to share with our listeners?
I retired some years ago, and I'm really not working on any particular subject now. And there are some papers you might see my name as a co-author on a number of papers that keep appearing because of my colleagues continue to work on some of the data that we had collected during all those many decades that I was actively engaged in research.
So the next question was, how did you manage to devote so much time for your clinical research activities despite being so busy with seeing patients as well as having administrative duties?
I firmly believe that research can be done only by busy clinicians. The clinical research will emerge out of busy clinics. It will not emerge out of people who are sitting at home in isolation. So I have been busy, but you have a team, you have collaborations, interdisciplinary researches, you generate ideas, and you wish your basic scientists and your other colleagues in other disciplines to work on those ideas and collect data. And that is how the clinical research is most often are done. Well, towards the end of my career, I did have more administrative duties, but if you love research as a passion, and I'm sure I was quite passionate about research in my career, you would find time. Any time of the day is good time for generating research ideas. You don't put any unsolved question under the carpet. You don't sleep over. You try to figure out. You have to find the answers. And I'm sure there are more questions than answers in the world.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple more questions. The next question was, how did you maintain a work-life balance with so many different activities going on? Some of us who are involved in clinical research find it quite hard to maintain a balance between being at work and being at home. So how did you manage to pull it off?
A major challenge in my life to strike a balance between my work and life, and I was spending almost like 12 to 14 hours a day in my clinic, in the hospital and the OR, finding very little time for day-to-day activities in my family affairs. In the early part of my career, I was very fond of traveling, and we used to take at least two vacations. And with my family, I've traveled practically all over the country, driving my own car. So those were fun times, and we really cherished those memories of traveling to different parts of the world when I was totally detached from my clinical research and academic duties.
The last question was, is there any special message for young researchers who are watching this episode?
For the young researchers and young doctors, my parting advice would be to not stop asking questions. What I say is, before you learn the answers, learn to ask questions. In my paradigm, learning questions, how to ask a question, how to frame a question, how precise you should be in asking that question and asking your query. I think that's what, with the availability of Google and such search engines, it's so easy to find whatever is known about a particular subject, about a particular aspect of a question, and you need to find out the outer boundaries of knowledge. You need to figure out what questions have no answers, and those are the questions you need to chase in your research. They are the questions which you should frame your research grants and research questions and try to figure out the answers. And I'm sure all those answers that you find, all those papers that will emerge would have a huge impact all over the world.
So we come to the end of this interaction with Professor Amod Gupta. Sir, thank you very much for being on Research Live and spending time with us and sharing your research journey with all of us. I think it's been inspirational right from the start to finish, and I think all of us feel very motivated by everything that you have done, and I'm sure that the path that you have set out for us will help us and all our listeners to achieve a lot of success in the field of clinical research. Thank you very much once again, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabyasachi, for providing with your excellent platform to share my thoughts on research. You may not be aware that I'm on the regular mailing list of your Sen Gupta Research Academy. I've always enjoyed looking at the Academy website, and especially your lectures on the paper writing skills and biostatistics have always impressed me. Your academy perhaps is the only one in India that I'm aware of which provides very high quality content on all aspects of manuscript preparation and biostatistics. I'd like to once again thank you very much and wish you all the best in your research endeavors. Thank you.